Shalom, giving all praises to Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai, double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and salutations unto you, Akim. I wanted to do a continuation of modern Zebulun, prophecy emphasizing who Zebulun is today, which are the Israelites of the South American Isthmus, right, which is essentially from Guatemala to Panama. And I want to add some details that I didn't include in my last video from the prophecy. And of course, this is actually going to touch up on Issachar as well. Let's see here. I might just include Issachar in this lesson, actually. So this is Genesis, the 49th chapter. It says, verse 13 says, Zebulun should dwell at a haven of the sea, which of course we know is the South American Isthmus, which is that small strip of land between North and South America. It says, and he shall be for a haven of ships, of course, the Panama Canal, the most busy canal via ship, import, export on the planet. And then continue to read, it says, and his border shall be unto Zidon, which we know, well, I went into the last video where that term Zidon means sport fishing or fishery. So to, fishing in general. And I connected that through prophecy of where they are geographically and what takes place there. But I also want to emphasize the point of Zidon from the historic status of the Zidonians of the ancient world, who were, and when you go to the book of Kings, it speaks about it, but they were essentially shipmasters. And they worked for King Solomon, and they came to the Americas. All right, it speaks about the land of Ophir. That's speaking of South America. All right, that's talking about the landmass of Guatemala. All right. But let me continue to read. All right. Let me continue on that point. So Sidon in the when you get the Olmec heads, that's historically what that comes from. Not a Olmec empire, as some will want you to believe, but that actually comes from the history of those Canaanites who worked for Solomon, King Solomon, where they actually erected those heads. What was that? About 1700 years BC, 1700 BC, give or take, in that time period. Not 1700 BC. I'm sorry. They did that roughly 900 BC. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I was looking at some numbers that a map had. It was incorrect. That is actually the biblical timeline. This took place roughly 900 BC, give or take. So let's see here. And I want to show you that on the map where the border. Now, let me go to the Hebrew word. I'm sorry. Goodness sake. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. So that term, where is that? Oh, yeah, the border. Let me get the word, the term border in the Hebrew. All right. Which is Yarakah. Why Yarakah? Now, the actual context is why Yarakathwa, but the root word is Yarakah. And that Yarakath is plural, which when you go into that Yarakah, it means flank, side, extreme parts. That's the borders. All right. Now, when you go into a map of the Olmec footprint, when you look at the Olmec footprint on a map, you will see that it is literally the footprint of the Olmec is on the flank, the outer part, the border of where Zebulun prophetically is, which, as I said, from Guatemala to Panama, and you see the footprint of the Olmecs is right in South Mexico, which is the border of the Zebulonites. All right, and you see the outer skirt footprint along the Pacific. That's the flank. That larger part by the bay, that is the flank of the landmass of Zebulun. All right, so that's why it says his border should be unto Zidon. If you go here, you'll see this is where the Olmec footprints were. All right, which the Olmecs is not an empire that lived. The Olmecs it goes back to the Zidonians that came to the Americas. All right, on the behest of Solomon, King Solomon. All right. A lot of this stuff that they attribute to the Zidonians with those larger, what they attribute to the so-called Olmecs with the Olmec heads, that didn't have anything to do with civilization. The civilization took place in America roughly 200 years later. There was nobody living in America in 1200 BC. Those time periods are wrong. People didn't start living in the Americas until I'll say roughly 750 BC, give or take, in that vicinity of time. All right. Okay. Anyway, so that point has been made, but I actually forgot to include that in the. Well, it's just I did forget to include that in the last lesson. Now, I also want to touch up, since we're here, let's touch up on Issachar. Verse 14, it says, Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens. And when you go into a map of the Americas, Issachar are the so-called Mexicans, all right? Which Issachar means he is higher. Yashakar. All right, let's go to it. Issachar. Sometimes I have trouble saying that name, but Issachar. All right, which means he is higher. Yes, you can translate it loosely to there's recompense, but it really means he is higher. All right. See the root word shakar, which means higher. Okay. Now, are not the so-called Mexicans hired? Do they not work all the jobs, the labor-based jobs in America? Yes, that's a fulfillment of prophecy of his name, meaning he is hired. Okay. Let me go. It said he's a strong ass, and the Mexicans, so-called Mexicans, the Issacharites, are very strong. They're very durable people. Okay? Trust me, I know some. All right? And you can see just simply how they work. All right? An ass is a donkey. A donkey is known for labor work. All right? Issacharites labor. Look what they did when they built those pyramids. All right? Which we're going to get that in prophecy. But that's a very laborsome job to do, to build pyramids. Okay, and they build up the skyscrapers in America now. Who's building those skyscrapers? Who's building the buildings? The Issacharites, the Mexicans. Strong ass. Chamawar. That's the root word. But chamawar, which ass is going essentially going to a donkey, which that's a representation of a laborsome person. All right. All right. Anyway. Let me see. Two burdens represents the North and South America. Verse 15 says, he saw that rest was good in the land, that it was pleasant, which is Mexico. It says, and bowed his shoulder, Mexico and the Americas actually, and America as well, and bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant unto tribute. All right, which that's what he did in America. He became a servant. You know, the Issacharites are servants. The so-called Mexicans are servants in their own land. All right. You know, he said he bowed down his shoulder to bear by doing what? Laboring and building up these buildings and doing all the laborsome jobs in America. All right. It says, and he saw that rest was good. Right. Now, let's see here. Let's go. When you go into the Mayans and the modern Mexicans today, it's a part of their culture to take naps in the midst of the day. All right. I'm serious. That's if you know, you know. All right. Let me see. It says, yes, evidence suggests that the ancient, this is from AI Overview, the ancient Maya and their descendants took naps often in hammocks. Hammocks were integral to the Mayan life and culture. Several of the it says, serving as places for sleeping, napping, and even childbirth and death. Wow. Let me see. Let me go to... so let's go to right here. It says, while the term siesta might be more associated with Spanish culture and its influence, the practice of taking the afternoon rest or nap appears to have been part of the Mayan way of life. In modern Yucatan, and Mexicans do this to this day. That's, if you observe and if you pay attention to Mexicans, they take naps during the day. Always. They always take naps. All right, just like their ancestors, the Mayans. It says, in modern Yucatan, both beds and hammocks are commonly owned, with hammocks frequently used for naps. That's not a part of every culture. That's a part of their culture. The Mayans, which the modern-day Mexicans, which they're the ancient Issacharites. All right, and that's a part of the prophecy. It says, and he saw that rest was good. That's part of the prophecy showing who they are. All right. Now let's go to oh my goodness. Let's go to Deuteronomy the 33rd chapter. And we're touching up on Issachar and Zebulun. Now consider Zebulun and Issachar, their names are mentioned together in both Genesis the 49th chapter and Deuteronomy 33. They're also, their land masses border each other. The land of Mexico and the land of Guatemala to Panama. All right, that's all also noting to the prophecy of who they are. I like to mention that detail. All right. Verse 18, Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 18. And of Zebulun, he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. Verse 19, they shall call the people unto the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall suck of the abundance of the seas. Is not Zebulun a haven of seas? Which this is actually going also into the future prophecy of ruling over the nations as well, if you have a spiritual eye. But the seas represents the nations. But, I'm not going to go that far with it. I'm just going to keep it simple. It says, they should suck of the abundance of the seas and the treasures hid in the sand, which is talking about the natural resources, the precious metals, all right, in those land masses. Let's show you. Remember, it said what? It says, they shall call the people unto the mountain. And when you look at the pyramids of Mesoamerica, they're located in Mexico, southern Mexico, most primarily, and in the Guatemala vicinity, in Honduras vicinity, right, which is the Zebulunites and the Issacharites. All right, that's them calling the people into the mountain. Now, yes, when when the Spaniards came, they had shifted over to worshiping idols. But originally, they were worshiping Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh. They were worshiping the God of Israel, Yahweh, on these on these high places, these mountains. All right, which these pyramids are mountains. I'll prove that. Let's go to 2nd Esdras. Originally, they were worshiping Yahweh. All right, that was the purpose of those being built. Let's prove it. Let's go to the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 13. Not chapter 13. Chapter what is it? No, that's not 13. No, goodness sake, what is it? Chapter, let me see, never mankind dwelt. Yeah, chapter 13, I'm sorry. 2nd Ezra chapter 13, verse 40. I'll start at verse 40. It says, those are the 10 tribes, which the Issacharites and the Zebulunites are part of those 10 tribes, the northern kingdom, which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea, the king, whom Salmanassar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, which is roughly 700 BC. It says, and he carried them over the waters. All right, that's talking about the Tigris and Euphrates. It's talking about those waters. It says, and so came they into another land, right, in the land of the Medes, all right, when you go into the land of the Medes, that's where they will put the land of the Medes. It was before it was the Medes, it was the land of Elam. It was actually the Assyrians who destroyed and killed those city states in western Elam, and the Medes migrated and possessed those lands. That was originally Elamite land. Point being, they were put in the land of the Medes. We can get that on the map. It says, the Bible tells you that actually. It says carried them over the waters, and so they came into another land. All right, that other land is the land of the Medes. All right, let's prove it. Well, let's go to let me see here. So we showed you that they worshipped and did sacrifices to Yahweh on these. These are the mountains, those pyramids. All right. Let's show the ancient map of Medes, the landmass of the Medes. Dang it. Let me see. These are good, but still, let me see here. If I can. Let me see. All right, essentially they were taken into this land over here that you see to be Elam. Let me see if I can go to a good map. Oh my goodness. Why can't they just give me a good map? Let me see. Medea. See? Right here. This is a good one. See? Medea. All right? They were taken over, all right, and they were brought over from the Tigris and Euphrates, all right? And they were taken over. This is the water they passed over when they went into slavery by the Assyrians, all right? And they were brought into the land of Medea, or the land of the Medes, all right? And let's show you what they did, the next stage of migration. It says, but they took this counsel among themselves that they will leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. That's talking about the Americas. Verse 42, that they might there keep their statutes. So when they were on those pyramids, those high places, those mountains, though originally they did that to worship Yahweh. All right. Verse 42, it says that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they enter into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. Look, you see that Euphrates? They migrated from the land of the Medes. All right. You got the Zagros Mountains and so on and so forth. But they migrated from there and they went in through the Euphrates River. They would actually they were a lot of them actually were put between the Tigris and Euphrates when you go into the history. All right, they were a lot of them were put between that landmass of the Tigris and the Euphrates. All right, some of them, of course, migrated deeper into the land of the Medes, but a lot of them were really planted in that landmass between the Tigris and the Euphrates. All right, now. It says they went into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them. He's talking about constellations and chariots, all right? And it held still the flood. He allowed them to go through the ocean without being consumed by their boats. It says, till they were passed over. It says, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. And the same region is called Issachar, which Issachar is speaking of the Americas, all right? Which means another land in the Hebrew, all right? And it will take them a year and a half from this point, from the Persian Gulf. They entered into through the Persian Gulf, okay, from the Euphrates River, and they migrated from there. All right, they migrated from there, all the way through underneath Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, and Yemen and Oman underneath there, and they migrated. This is actually a good map. They migrated to the Americas from there. Hey, this is a nice map. I'm sorry. Come on, man. I want that map. And see, this is why we tell you the Iranians or the Carmanians. You see right here, Carmania. When you go into prophecy where it speaks about the Carmanians coming out in World War III, that's speaking of the Iranians, which that land of Persia, Elam, is Iran. Anyway, that's a side note. Even this website is called Empire in Ancient Iran. That's a side note. Okay, so that's proof. That's proof that the Issacharites and the Zebulunites are Israelites, or the Mexicans and the people between Guatemala all the way to Panama